Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of possibly the greatest podcast ever on the history of the earth, the Caregiver's Toolbox, tools for everyday caregiving, where we give you information and education on senior care topics. My name is Ryan McAniff, and I am the owner of Minute Women Home Care in historic Lexington, Massachusetts. And I'm talking with Renee Coleman from Cross Country Mortgage, who is in the town next to where Minute Women is located. I won't announce it, but you're close by. And how's everything going, Renee? Thanks for hopping on.
Excellent. Thank you. Thanks, Brian. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to chat today.
Yes, so we were just kind of doing a pre-conversation before I hit the record button, and certainly the first thing we're going to get to, kind of a little bit of timeliness, is where we're going to talk about seniors. We're going to talk about reverse mortgages and how that can help people, especially in these times right now where home values continue to skyrocket. But we also are going to talk about just the general housing market because there's a lot of questions and concerns. There's a lot of greed, but there's still a lot of fear. And I think it would be timely to talk about that because, you know, the real estate market has many different parts to it, but they're all interconnected. And what we're seeing right now is it's not running as efficiently as it's supposed to when people downsize, when they upgrade, when they move away and things like that. And it's a little wonky. And because of that, we're seeing housing rates go up quite a bit right now. So Renee, let's talk about reverse mortgages. When I met you about a year and a half ago, you were still with Cross Country, and you were going around and talking with anybody in senior care that would listen about reverse mortgages. And it was the first time that I had spoken with somebody like you, and it certainly made sense. So just kind of explain to people what reverse mortgages are and how they can help seniors.
Sure. So a reverse mortgage is a product for seniors that are 60 and older that have equity in their house. So if you think of it almost like an equity loan, right? So you own a property, you've got some equity in it, and you want to take some of that equity out. And so with a reverse mortgage, now they're known as a HECM, home equity conversion mortgage. If you see that term out there, it's exactly like a reverse mortgage. It's just got a new name, a HECM. And so the loan product, you've got to be 60 or older. It has to be your primary residence. And we take the equity out. And there are multiple ways that we can do that, and multiple ways that you can utilize it. We're sort of in a prime time right now. So the criteria that we use to determine how much of that equity we're going to allow you to take out, it's based on 3 criteria: your age, the value of the house, and the interest rate. So right now we've got historically high values as well as historically low interest rates. So the opportunity is at its best right now to allow you to access the most equity in the house. And the nice thing with a reverse mortgage is there's no monthly mortgage payment. So you still have to pay your property taxes and your homeowner's insurance, but you have no mortgage payment.
And so, you know, being a complete newbie, let's say for easy numbers, what's the maximum percentage somebody can take out of the house again?
It's around 50%.
50%.
And it will vary based on your age. So the younger you are, the lesser we'll let you take. The older you are, the more we'll let you take. So if you're, closer to the 60, 70 age range, it might be closer to 45%. If you're in the 70 to 80 range, it's probably closer to 60%.
Gotcha.
But for rough estimates, about 50%.
So, and the question I was going to ask is, for easy round numbers, you have $1 million house, you're able to take out 40%, which gives you $400,000 in hard cash. And let's say your house property goes up by 20% over the course of another 2 or 3 years, like we've literally seen going on over the course of, can you go back and say, hey, Renee, I want to take 40% out of the equity that I've gained in my house? What is that option there?
So the option is to refinance your reverse mortgage, which is a thing. So much like you would refinance your regular mortgage, to get a lower interest rate, you can refinance a reverse mortgage to access more cash. So I just worked with a woman who had done a reverse mortgage about 10 years ago, and she had spent all of the cash down. There wasn't anything left. but 10 years had passed and the value of her house had significantly increased. And so we were able to refinance. So we paid off the existing, in addition to that, her interest rate was 7%. So yeah, so we paid off the existing reverse mortgage and took out a new reverse mortgage. And then she was able to, she had a little more cash now available, and the interest rate was in the twos. So it was a big difference.
Absolutely. And so where this can help with seniors is that, especially in the Boston area, but probably in many different parts of the country, you have people, you have older adults who are there, like you said, in their 70s and maybe even in their 80s, that, they didn't have the itch to move from house to house every 4 or 5 years or upgrade. So they may have bought a house in Belmont or Arlington or Somerville in 1970 or something like that for $50,000 when it was Slummerville and not a nice place to live. And
Right.
now this house is worth $1 million. But that doesn't mean that that person is rich in terms of driving a BMW and a Rolex and having a lot of cash liquid wealth. And they start needing to have anything from repairing the house and maintenance to upkeep of the house to staying in the home, or even getting into the senior care communities, not communities, but they might want in-home care, or they might want some other services that make their lives easier, and they need to be able to have liquid assets to be able to pay
Yeah.
for that.
Yeah. And one of the biggest things that we hear is, so we refer to it as, oh, excuse me, we refer to it as house rich, cash poor, right? So they're sitting on all of this equity. And the biggest thing that we hear is they've been living in the house 40, 50 years, and that's great. There's no mortgage payment, but the property taxes keep going up. Right. So now you're on a fixed income in retirement, and you've got this beautiful home that you've lived in for 40 years and it's paid off, but your property taxes keep going up. Your income's not going up, but your property taxes are. So that's one of the really big uses. And then, like you said, home care. Nobody wants to go into assisted living. They want to stay in that house they've been in. And if there is medical care needed, they can do it in their home, and they can use a reverse mortgage and use those funds to pay for that care.
Now, reverse mortgages, and this was before I knew about them, because I'm 37 years old. So getting to know about housing wasn't a real priority for me when I was 17. But 20 or 30 years ago, and you have been open about this, is that reverse mortgages had kind of a bad rap, and
Yeah.
I kind of equated to kind of some of the things that were going on with mortgage lending in that led up to the 2007 crisis, where maybe there wasn't as much regulation, or there was a little bit of loosey-goosey stuff going on that allowed a situation to kind of maybe spiral out of control. But I don't think it's a coincidence that we're seeing more and more people talking about reverse mortgages, because, like you said, so many people are house rich and cash poor, that
Yeah.
there needs to be some type of option to be able to do that. So what happens, again, back to that $1 million house, 40%, 400,000? How does that end? How does that get paid back? I mean, obviously one obvious way is you get to sell the house, and you get whatever your proceeds you're due, and then the remainder of the proceeds would go to, I assume, whoever's next in line with the inheritance. But
Right.
maybe there must be 2 or 3 different ways that people pay off these lines of credit or reverse mortgages.
Yeah. So when you access, so we'll use your example, the $1 million house. We're going to let you access roughly 400,000 of it, right? So we're going to put that in a line of credit for you, and that line of credit sits there. Whenever you need it, you can draw from it. Think of it as like a savings account, really, but the bank is holding it for you. And whenever you need it, you can draw it down. We can set it up so that there's a monthly draw. If you say, you know what, I need $1,000 a month to make ends meet, great, we'll set that up. If you say, you know what, I need 20,000 to fix the roof, and I need, 5,000 to pay my property taxes, great, you can take it out in lump sums, but it just sits there until you need it, and we can set it up any way you want it. Now, when you access it, when you use that money, let's say you took $10,000 out. So now your 400 is down to 390. And now the reverse mortgage that you owe is that 10,000, right? So that 10,000 is what's going to accrue interest over time. So that grows, right? So this bucket has been reduced by 10,000. This bucket has grown by 10,000. So over time, that will accumulate. In order to get rid of it, you have to pay off the mortgage. It's a lien on your property, just like any other mortgage. So it has to be paid off. When you're no longer living in the home as your primary residence, that mortgage comes due. Now, whether that's because you've sold the home, and it's like any other mortgage, you sell your house, you sell it for $1 million and you owe 200,000, that lien gets paid off, the rest of the proceeds are yours. Whether you have now gone into, let's say you go into assisted living and you're not coming back to the home as your primary residence, that mortgage will come due. And that can be, you know, if you want to keep the house in the family, somebody else is going to have to get a regular forward mortgage to pay off the existing reverse mortgage. And let's say you pass away. Both, you know, if there's a spouse, husband and wife living in the home, the mortgage only comes due when the second of the two borrowers is no longer living in the home. And let's say that borrower now passes away, leaves the house to the kids. Same exact thing with a forward mortgage as with a reverse mortgage. The kids can keep the house. They'll have to get their own mortgage to pay off the existing mortgage, or they sell the house and that lien gets paid off and the rest of the proceeds are theirs.
Absolutely. And it, in my opinion, keep real estate because it just continues to keep going up.
Right.
But that makes sense. And so one question, let's say, you know, so where the bank is making money is off of the interest rate that is pulled out of that line of credit. When you take principal out, there's interest on that. Does that, I mean, let's say, so if in theory though, somebody could take in our example, that full $400,000, and the reason why you only give 40% or 50% or 60% is you also, what I'm asking is the interest rate, the interest that's accumulated, doesn't necessarily affect the principal that you can pull out of the house. That's just going to have to be repaid in addition to if you pulled the full 400,000 out, let's say there's an additional $50,000 in interest over the course of time or whatever it is, the full mortgage for the son or daughter to remortgage the house in a traditional mortgage would just have to be that $450,000, correct?
Correct. Yep.
So that's why you have a different amount, because you don't give 80% like a forward mortgage would be, because then that interest is going to make it more like 15% or 10% or whatever it might be.
And we don't want you to get upside down, right? That was one of the negatives about the program in, 20 years ago. They used to let you take a lot more equity out, and there was more opportunity for you to be upside down. Now, with the new programs and all of the protections in place, we're not going to let you take out as much equity, but also if you should go upside down, God forbid we have another, real estate crash like the 2008 time, and values drop. If you go upside down, these loans are called non-recourse loans. So there is no responsibility for the borrower or their heirs to pay back that difference. So even if you go upside down, you're okay. But we have those protections in place so that the likelihood of you going upside down are much, much smaller now.
Yeah, absolutely. And, and that's one of the things kind of going to regular real estate that, the Warren Buffett, I like him a lot. He seems to know what he's talking about. He's only like the third richest guy in the world, and he's done it all on his own, basically. But he says, be fearful when others are greedy, be greedy when others are fearful. It definitely feels like, in my opinion, in the real estate world, we're on the greedy side. People are selling for as much. People are putting in kind of crazy offers on, not necessarily monetary wise, just monetary wise, but they'll buy a house sight unseen, no conditions of any kind, whether it's an inspection or they might just pay cash, or they'll just say, hey, listen, I want the house so badly, I'll put 20% down, and if the boiler blows up and it costs me 20 grand, well, then the boiler blows up and costs me 20 grand. And so The reason I'm getting to this is that we had the crash in 2007 and 8, and even in the Massachusetts area, housing prices didn't really go down a whole lot. They went down maybe what, 3 to 5%, maybe in some cases 6 or 7%. It wasn't an overwhelming drop in the Boston area. And that was when apparently like capitalism was ready to collapse in on itself. And so it makes me wonder, well, if these prices, housing prices, and I get the Zillows just like you do probably in your property, where every week they're like, your property's gone up another 5%. And you're like, how is this, one, sustainable? And two, even if it does correct itself, well, can it correct itself any more than when capitalism was on the brink of collapse and about to be tossed over the cliff into the ocean? Because, like we're not at that point right now. So what is it going to go down 2%? Like what it seems like it's just a weird time, and that's got to be really good for the clients that you're working for, but it also must scratch your head a little bit in wondering how sustainable that is. And hey, listen, these reverse mortgages are going to be popular because you can get that money out of the reverse mortgage, and then the house is probably going to appreciate by 10% or 15% in the next 5 to 10 years anyways.
Mm.
So like what do you make of all of this? How do you look at all of this?
So we get that question a lot on the forward mortgage, the regular mortgage side of things. I work with borrowers every day, and they want to understand the market a little bit more because, like you said, they're overpaying. Going well over asking price for the home, and waiving all of their contingencies. So, waiving inspections, and like you said, some of them sight unseen purchasing the home. So we definitely have a shortage of properties. And that's kind of what's driving the market, if you will. So historically, over time, home equity grows at a rate of about 3%. That's kind of the national average over time. And, the last 2 years, 3 years maybe, it's been significantly higher in this area, right? We're looking at 10 and sometimes 15% in a given year. My house alone, I just bought my house 9 months ago, and it's gone up 12% in 9 months. I mean, it's crazy, right? So borrowers want to know, what are we getting ourselves into, right? So we want to know, when will I get my equity back if I'm overpaying for something, or going over asking, or going over market market values, if you will. They want to know how long it's going to take for them to recoup that money. Now, a lot of people have asked me, do you think there's going to be this rush of foreclosures like there were the last time the market dropped? We don't see that happening, excuse me, because there's so much more equity in properties right now. Everybody's sitting on so much equity. So like you said, Ryan, if values are going to go down, really how much are they going to go down? And we don't really see it as going down. We see it maybe leveling out, but not necessarily going down. Rates have been pretty steady. The values, we're still seeing it going up, and purchase prices still going up. That hasn't leveled out yet. But I think the panic that there's going to be, a deluge of foreclosures, I don't think is warranted.
No, I mean, it will be interesting, certainly, but the reason why big reason why we got involved in the big crisis 10 years ago or 12 years ago now was because people were buying houses at 100, 105, 110% of their value so that they could put money in, expecting that, hey, housing prices are always going to go up. And then when there was some stagnance in that, and they weren't going up at the rate they were going up, well, then it caused certainly issues. It was that speculation. Of course, there were all sorts of things involved with it. Go watch the Big Short movie if you want to learn about that great movie.
Right.
But that's an interesting topic, right? Because what's going to happen, because you also have all these renters that haven't been paying rent on properties, which means that property owners have been either not paying their mortgage, or they've been using, lines of credit, or they've been using, personal finances to pay for this. Well, when those people get kicked out of their home, because it's going to happen, they're going to get kicked out of their homes in a couple months because they're
Right.
not going to be able to pay 12 months worth of rent, back rent. What does that do to the housing market? Because all of a sudden, all these people that are willing to spend 20-30% more, or whatever it is, $50,000 more on a asking price of a house, might just say, you know what, that $50,000 could literally pay for like 10 years worth of my rentals. Maybe I'll run into the rentals. And so if that happens, well, then supply and demand kicks in, where the supply starts evening out with the demand, and then you might have a little bit of a calming of the market. The other thought I had was, if the Fed increases their interest rates, well, whether you're paying $50,000 more for a house, or you're going to be paying $50,000 more over the course of a 30-year loan, still $50,000. So is
Right.
that going to be the thing that kind of slows the brakes on everything?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it's going to be an interesting thing. But yeah, I don't necessarily see a lot of people getting kicked out of their, foreclosing on their houses, at least in this
Right.
area. But it's going to be an interesting 12, 16, 24 months, because how is that going to, I never thought that houses would be selling for 1.2, $1.3 million in freaking Medford. Like
Right.
Medford, what is going
Right.
on? But it's happening.
It is.
And so, like, do you think that people are going to retreat back to rentals, and that's what's going to calm the market? Or do you think it's going to be more of interest rates coming up? Or is it a third option that I haven't even thought of?
So rates are probably going to increase a little bit, a little bit. Right now we're still in the high twos, low threes.
It's not a lot.
So, historically, we're still at the bottom, of where they've ever been. So even if they creep up a tiny bit, the problem is when you have an increase in interest rate, but you also have an increase in the value of the property, now you're qualifying for less, right? So the higher the interest rate, the less you qualify for to purchase. And so when the prices keep going up, it makes it a little bit harder. So there needs to be some sort of leveling out there. Now, the interesting thing on the rental properties, so we have two things happening, right? The tenants haven't been paying their rent. The landlords have gotten some sort of agreement with their lenders. If they can't make the full payments themselves, they've gone into, some sort of forbearance or deferment plan with them. And all that's going to come to an end, and every borrower is going to have a conversation with their lenders. The lenders, we've been in it long enough now. In the beginning, it was a little sketchy, and the lenders didn't really know what to do with it, and all of these, borrowers, and at the beginning of COVID, nobody really knew, am I still going to have a job, and am I still going to be able to make a mortgage payment? So a lot of them, went into forbearance just in case, and then have slowly, realized, okay, my job is stable and my income is stable, and I'm okay to continue paying my mortgage. And they've made arrangements with their lenders. So the lenders have had a little bit of time now to sort of put some plans in place. So there will be some options for those homeowners, those landlords, to sort of renegotiate again, because they have so much equity in their houses. So, even though maybe they haven't been making a mortgage payment, the lenders also haven't required a payment either. And so now that we're sort of getting to the end, and so they'll have to come to an agreement. And whether that's, sometimes it's paying all of it up front. Sometimes it's, saying you owe X amount of, payments for the last 12 months that you haven't made. And we're going to split it out for the next 12 months and increase your mortgage payment to catch up. And some of them will be able to tack it on to the end. Every lender is a little bit different. Every loan program is a little bit different, and your options. So every lender has their own rules and guidelines. So those landlord owners will have to make some arrangements. But again, there needs to be a little bit of a catch up and shift between the rates and the values of the homes.
And part of the reason why I think it's valuable talking about this, because I'm sure there's somebody that's gotten to this point in the podcast and say, hey, this doesn't sound like we're talking about senior care anymore. We're talking more about general real estate, is because it's all interconnected. Because one of the issues we have, at least in the coastal cities, is that especially in New England, tri-state, and in these heavily populated cities, is that seniors can't get out of their homes because there's nowhere else to go that they can afford. That is a downsize. For example, I live in a condo. I've looked, there are condos selling in my neighborhood, in my surrounding cities and towns, that are smaller, not as nice in my opinion, and are costing more than my condo cost me when I purchased this place. Now, granted, my
Mhm.
condo has gone up in price, but I would end up buying a house, or I would have to upgrade to a 800 or a million or whatever crazy number it would be to find a new place to live. And I think,
Right.
that happened with one of my employees. She lived in Westford, and she wanted to be near her grandchildren, as most people would want to be, but she couldn't afford it because she was already in a 1,800 square foot ranch home that she probably bought for now we could only dream of what she bought that for. And she was selling it for a song, but she realized, like, I can't even downsize because there's nowhere to downsize to. And they ended
Mhm.
up compromising and going up to New Hampshire, where they could rent an apartment for a reasonable cost or whatever it was. And so that certainly, those houses that would be probably normally entry level homes for some home buyers, or more modestly priced, maybe aren't going to market as quickly because, listen, I don't have anywhere else to go. There's nowhere in the
Yeah.
surrounding area that I can buy. So I'd rather do home modifications to stay in my home as long as I can, and
Mhm.
then I'm leased in my home. And then they convert the first floor to being basically a ranch, right? Or they have
Right.
the stair lifts. I mean, do you consider that a problem, or do you think that's as big of a deal as maybe I'm making it, or are you not seeing as much of that as maybe I thought you would?
Yeah, it is an issue. So there is not enough inventory out there. So we still have a few, um, uh, you know, uh, due to COVID, there's still a shift going on, where, seniors, for one, they were staying put. They weren't going anywhere, right? So their houses were not going on the market because they weren't leaving, right? They weren't going into assisted living facilities. They weren't even leaving the house to even look for a new property, right? So there was that. Then we have those that realized, hey, I can work from home. I don't have to live in a commutable distance from my job downtown, right? So there's been a little bit of a moving out into the suburbs. So there's that shift still happening, where people are realizing, hey, I don't have to live here anymore. I have other options. And I mentioned, myself included, we moved in the middle of COVID last year because we realized we don't have to be. My husband works in the Seaport District, and he had to be in a place that was commutable to work every day. He's not going to have that anymore. So it opened up our options of where we could go. So there's that shift still happening. And so it's kind of a catch-22, right? I want to sell my house and I want to move, but I have nowhere to go. So that's kind of keeping everybody in one spot. So I think we haven't seen the end of it yet as far as that shifting, and people haven't quite settled yet in where they're going to be. I have seen a little bit more inventory coming on, a little bit more than we've seen. But for those seniors, maybe, like you said, Ryan, modifying the home to stay in the home, maybe that's the best option, if you can't find somewhere to downsize to. So, when we talk about downsizing, we talk about literally size of the home, but we also talk about the mortgage, right? So you don't want a big mortgage. You want to, purchase something else and not have to have a mortgage in your retirement age. So we're still trying to figure that out, but I am seeing a lot of seniors saying, you know what, I like my house. I need to maybe do a few things to do some upkeep and some maintenance, and sort of modify it to stay, but I'm going to stay.
and that's a really good point that I didn't even consider, but didn't bring it up in the conversation. But there's probably also a portion of people, being seniors and their families, that said, "Hey, listen, we were considering moving you into independent living or over 55 or maybe even assisted living, but this COVID came by, and then we decided, hey, listen, we don't know when this is going to end, so let's just spend the 20,000 or $30,000 modifying your home, or maybe $50,000, whatever it is, some real money modifying it, and you can stay here indefinitely until your decline hits, and instead of being in the independent and downsizing, hey, listen, we already spent the money, so why would we move you now that COVID's over? We've already done all the hard work in getting the house ready. There's no point in you moving out of it right now either." um,
Exactly.
Now,
Yeah.
one thing, do you think there's going to be, I mean, just, it's your gut feeling. My gut feeling is there's going to be a bit more than we realize buyer's remorse, and the location that you're in maybe that would be a long commute, but it would be doable. But I feel like there might be people that buy outside of 495 or buy up into the New Hampshire towns of like Salem or wherever it is, and then they realize, and you're in one of these towns because I grew up in the town next to you, like things close at 9 o'clock at night. And then all of a sudden, like it's a ghost town at 8, 9 o'clock at night. And they're used to living in the big city where, everything was open till at least midnight, if not 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. You think there's going to be some buyer's remorse with people that sit there and go like, maybe this isn't exactly what we wanted, and we kind of had a knee-jerk reaction, and then that brings that kind of, it's like the tide goes out and then it kind of comes back in, and then all of a sudden people are going to want to come back in closer to the city? Or do you think that's not going to be a big portion of people that decided to move out to the suburbs?
I do see that a little bit, and there's a distinct age category. So when you look at myself, I'm in my early 50s. I'm okay to leave the city. I'm okay to be in that bedroom community. I'm in bed by 9 o'clock anyway, so I don't care that the bars, we don't even have any bars, I don't think, in my town. So I'm okay with that. Now, my children are in their early 20s. They want nothing to do with it. They can't wait to get back into the city. They can't wait to get back to their jobs and go into the office, and they want to be in the city. So, I think there will still, like I said, there's still a shift going on. People haven't quite settled where they're going to be, but that buyer's remorse, I think we'll see a little bit of it.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
bound to happen a little bit. I mean, there's a certain percentage that have buyer's remorse no matter what the circumstances are. They say,
right.
maybe this wasn't the place that we wanted. It's funny because I remember a few years ago I was reading an article in the Wall Street Journal that made me chuckle, where it was about all these. When my parents moved from Massachusetts down to Florida, they were like overly conservative. They moved to a town, ironically called Beverly Hills. That there's nothing wrong with that town, but it was too, I don't want to use the word beneath them because that's a mean way of saying it. The people were nice, but they were in too lower of an income bracket than I think that they should have gone to. They could have been in a town that had a few more nicer restaurants, a few more, it was basically their options were Burger King, Outback, and like a Chili's. And it was like, this is, you like a nicer restaurant, right? But anyways, the reason I bring it up is that they purposely bought and built, kind of one of those manufactured homes that they give you a couple models to choose from, a ranch that they could age in and they could die in, and they wouldn't need to really do too many home modifications. And this article I was reading was that all these baby boomers had gone down to Florida or to Georgia, like many of them do, and bought this McMansion of 5,600 square feet because they needed a 3-story home with a 3-car garage for the boats and the ATVs. You know the story. But then, like 5 or 6 or 8 years later, as they started slowing down, there was nobody to sell it to because all the millennials and some of the, the late born Gen Xers couldn't afford a 5,600 square foot home because it's not just the house, it's the upkeep, it's the insurance, it's the furnishing it, it's a big home. And it just made me kind of, wonder, all right, well, you gotta think, people don't think about the future as much. And it makes me wonder with some of these houses that we see in like Concord, and maybe it will never happen, but I drive through Concord. I grew up in Concord, and they are taking and bulldozing homes and then putting a McMansion on there that takes up every square inch of that lot. And I wonder, like, is that going to happen the reverse, where we build up so much that people can't afford it, but at the same time, we're in a city that has a lot of money, a lot of pharmaceuticals, and it goes like that. But it made me wonder about the seniors again, overbuying into their favorite homes and then having real troubles getting rid of it because there was no market for a 5,600 square foot mansion down in Georgia and Florida.
Yeah, no, you're right. And again, it's a generational thing, right? You mentioned earlier in our conversation, the seniors today, they've lived in their homes 40, 50 years. My parents have been in the same home for almost 40 years, I think now. And so, but the younger generation, even myself included, I've moved around a little bit. I haven't been in that one position. And I think that, I would be mindful of the scenario you talked about. I'm not going to overbuy. I'm not going to, buy that 5,600 square foot McMansion. The towns are struggling with that now. They've got lots of housing issues. There's very little land left. And like you said, they're coming in and they're raising these homes and building these McMansions. So the towns are starting to sort of put some rules in place for that not to continue in certain towns. So it'll be interesting to see how it kind of all pans out. I think we're still trying to figure it all out. Where do we want to be? And I don't think everyone's quite settled yet since this upheaval in the last year.
Absolutely. It's going to be an interesting future. But I mean, how do people reach out to you, whether it's for a traditional mortgage or a reverse mortgage? What's your contact information so people can reach out if they like?
Sure. My website, and you can find all my contact information there, www.teamreneecoleman. And then my phone number is 978-737-7489.
Perfect. Well, your name is in the title right down here in the left-hand corner for the YouTube video. So people can just put team right before it, .com, and at the end, and they'll find you. Renee, thank you so much for hopping on. It was a great pleasure talking with you. I'm glad we did it. And
Thank you, Brian.
I'll see you soon at one of the networking events, I'm sure.
Awesome. I'm sure. Thank you. Have a nice weekend.
And thank you all to all of you listening to the Caregivers Toolbox. We will catch you on the next one.